All right, everybody. Very excited to have Steve Daria here. He is a real estate investor and broker, right, Steve, in Florida. You went
Yep.
through the housing crash in 2008, and you have a YouTube channel now, which we're going to talk about in a second, where you are basically predicting there's going to be another crash in the near future, and then it could potentially be worse than what you went through, what lots of people went through almost 15 years ago. So the first thing, though, I wanted to talk about is the fact that you got a lot of traction. And this is why I wanted to have you on too, because I talk to people who kind of question powerful voices or big voices in the media, whether it's in mainstream or alternative media. Dave Ramsey obviously has a lot of following in the real estate market, and he says there will not be a housing crash. So let me just play this really quick clip, and then I'm going to give you a second to introduce yourself and respond. Here we go.
What's going on with it, but I am positive, okay, that real estate is not going to go down in value in the next 5 years. Some of you are going, oh, it's artificially high, it's going to go down. No, it's not.
There's so much talk of the crash right now.
There is not. It's simply not going to go down. And let me help you with this, okay? I've been in real estate for 30 years. It's a real simple equation. 100%, I just taped a thing a few minutes ago for the Instagram goobies out there with Brooke, who runs Instagram stuff, but 100% of real estate prices is based on supply demand. Period. When there is more buyers than sellers, prices go up. When there is more sellers than buyers, prices go down. Now, there's things that affect how many buyers there are and how many sellers there are, but that's the equation. You know, inflation, recession, stagflation, idiots in the White House, high interest rates affect the number of buyers. But unless the number of buyers goes substantially below the number of sellers in the marketplace, you're not going to see prices go down. And we know that this is not.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there for a second. So yeah, he's all about supply and demand. And you did a response video talking about this, which I'm going to show in a second. What are your initial thoughts on that?
On his video?
Yeah, on the supply demand, like that's what matters. And so all these other things people are concerned about, the Fed raising interest rates, food prices going up, gasoline's way up, all that stuff, or even just people freaking out and then freaking each other out. Just, hey, word of mouth, like, I'm not buying. Are you going to buy? No, I'm not going to. And just that chilling effect. Those things really don't matter in the long run. It's a supply and demand thing. And I don't think that the demand is going to go that far down below the supply that it's going to cause a housing crash. I think that's essentially what he's saying, unless I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, he's right to a certain extent. I mean, if there's, low supply, demand's and high demand, then, prices are going to be higher and vice versa. So he's right on that. But I mean, not that video came out not too long ago, and you can see all the news headlines and how everything kind of switched like that, and where we're at today, and things kind of just fell off. And that was due to the rising interest rates. So as soon as the cost of money became not as cheap as it was, things are less affordable, and it's causing supply to rise.
Okay, give us a little bit of background on why anyone should listen to what you're saying anyway. Who are you, and what do you do?
I've been in real estate since 2003. I got licensed as a real estate agent 2006. Started a real estate brokerage here in Southwest Florida with my sister. Went through the crash and learned a lot from the last crash. And then we built our real estate company up to about 60 agents and ended up selling our brokerage, or 80% of it, in 2018. And then from there on out, over the years, I've been investing in real estate myself. And, once we sold our real estate brokerage, definitely had more time on my hands, which was the reason why creating my YouTube channel, so I can help other people make more educated decisions. Even if I'm flat out wrong in what I'm saying, at least you'll have an indication on how to prep for the future, which is not going to hurt your financial situation. If anything, it'll probably better your financial situation.
Okay. Let me play a quick clip from, this is your video reacting to Dave Ramsey basically him saying now is the time to buy a house, and you're saying WTF. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. Let me know if you can't hear it.
If you've been following the channel, I called out other housing cheerleaders, and these were the CEO of Century 21, the CEO of Coldwell Banker. You also have Barbara Corcoran coming out and talking kind of the same language as well. And they're talking about the velocity of real estate and all this kind of stuff. And I was calling these people out, just saying that, you know, unfortunately, the message they're putting out is for their own benefit for their companies, because they do not want to see a slowdown in real estate sales, because it will affect all of their bottom lines as real estate companies. So Dave Ramsey, the question was, this kid asked, should I wait until prices go down to buy a house? And these are quotes. He goes, prices are not going to come down. If you're waiting on prices to come down, you're never going to buy a house. Prices are not coming down. They are going to slow the rate in which they're increasing. I think you're going to see calming down, but we've never seen house prices go down in the modern America since the 1930s, except for one time, and that was 6 to 8 months in 2008. It was a financing bubble. It wasn't a real estate bubble. Phoenix, Las Vegas, and a few other major cities that were super hot, they contracted and prices went down. I was in that market as a real estate broker and an owner of a real estate firm, and our prices here in Southwest Florida got crushed. And I got another video on this in terms of the top 10 markets of people overpaying, and one of them is Fort Myers, which is here in Southwest Florida. And look, I was selling houses in, say, like Cape Coral, which is nearby Fort Myers, for literally $300,000, and then I was short selling comparable houses for literally $50,000 to $60,000. That's how big of a swing these prices came down.
Okay, so how? I guess maybe we should start with, how is 2022 the same or different from what you went through in 2008? Because Dave Ramsey and others that you cited are saying it's different. It's a different situation. We had these bad mortgages. It's just not the same. So let's talk similarities and differences real fast.
The biggest difference is similarity is we're in a bubble. How we got there is different. So obviously 2008, it was because of predatory lending, and anybody with a pulse could get a mortgage, stated income loans and everything else. It was a damn mess. Our lending requirements are much more stringent this time around. However, the amount of money, and I look at it, it's a money bubble. Like, look at every asset class right now. I mean, you're talking crypto, the stock market, pretty much every asset is starting to drop considerably. And it's because of the amount of money that was put into the system. And it's not comparable to any time in history of how much money has been put into the system, but also the amount of cheap money. And that's a problem, because there's a lot of corporations, major corporations, that are relying on cheap money to stay solvent. And a lot of companies are just not solvent. So I think in the future, you know, we're starting to see it now, but I think we're going to see mass layoffs, because the cost of money is getting much more expensive as the Fed raises rates, which they're anticipating, I think today, if not already, another 75 to 100 basis points. So as money gets more expensive, these companies are relying on cheap debt. They're probably going to start doing deep cuts, deep layoffs, and or go completely out of business, which is going to have effect on people's employment. So I think unemployment is going to go up considerably. Now, when people say we're not in a predatory lending environment, you know, for the last several years, VA loans you can get in with no money down, FHA 3.5% down, conventional financing 5% down. Okay, that's not significant money down. If you look back in the 70s and 80s, I mean, you had to put 20% down. And so I don't know off the top of my head how many loans were with, you know, 3.5% or 0% or 5% down. But I can tell you, just say, even if real estate prices flatlined and you bought at the top of the market and you had to sell your property, let's say you paid 400 grand and you put 5% down and you could sell the property for 400 grand. When you tack on all the closing costs and everything else, you're going to come to the table with the check at closing. If not, if you can't, then you're going to be upside down, which could put you into a, short sale position or foreclosure. So for Dave Ramsey or other people to say that, the market can't come down, I'm just going to disagree with that. And we're already seeing, look at new construction right now. Right now, new month supply of new construction is 9.3 months supply of new construction. Just to give you an idea, in 2020, August of 2020, it was 3.3 months of supply. So his defense is supply and demand. And I'm looking at him like eventually supply is going to go up. And now that's not taking in consideration other factors of the amount. I mean, we have, according to HUD, we have 4.57 million people delinquent on mortgage payments. We have 6.3 million people that are delinquent on their rent payments. So a lot of landlords that are not collecting rent, now that they're able to actually evict these people, they're probably going to list their properties for sale and unload that inventory. And then, I think the banks are going to speed it up and start the foreclosure process, because there was a foreclosure moratorium for the last 2 years. You couldn't foreclose on anybody. Of course, that's going to constrict supply. Mm-hmm. So it was a matter of time, like that's going to end. And then all these things are going to start coming to market, not to mention certain institutional investors that relied on cheap debt to buy houses. I think we're going to start seeing that inventory as well, because a lot of that cheap debt was not fixed. They're on adjustable loans as well, some 3, 5, 7 years. And when those loans adjust, I think you'll start to see larger investors actually start to liquidate inventory as well.
So I got a couple comments about people saying like, we want to sell right now, but no one is buying. I know that we know people personally who are selling right now and have heard from their real estate agents that, you can't ask for what you could have asked for even 6 to 8 months ago. When we look at Zillow, for instance, because we're considering in the next year, probably based on some of the stuff you're talking about, she's checking out, see what things look like at the beginning or second quarter of next year. We look at Zillow and it's like the last few years. So it's like this, and then it goes like this. And I mean, you see these prices, they're almost double what they were a couple of years ago. I don't know how, I mean, I don't know anything about real estate. I've never bought a house, but just looking at that doesn't look good to me. I don't know. I don't want to buy here, I guess, like that. And I don't know what the sort of real estate terminology for that is, but it just seems like if you can't get a low interest rate, if you've got all these other expenses, if people's income is not matching inflation rates, all these things together, I don't know how do people afford that? And then I've seen the prices now on houses we're watching come down by some $100,000, $120,000. Yeah. I don't know why you would do that if you weren't trying to really get out of your house and houses that are listed for, I don't know, 6 or 8 months now versus where it would be like in Seattle back in the day when I lived there, you had to give cash $50,000 over asking price, and you had to be there like 3 days before they listed. Like you had to know somebody who knew somebody. It just seems like a very different environment just from an allegorical standpoint.
Absolutely. And I think things have happened so rapidly, even going through the last real estate recession. I don't recall things happening so quickly. It's literally like somebody just took a switch and just turned it off, and it had everything related to mortgage rates as well. As soon as it went over 5%, is immediately that cheap money was no longer cheap enough to afford the $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 purchase price of a home. And we're seeing a lot. Well, let me preface this real quick too for your viewers. Real estate is microeconomics. Even here in Southwest Florida, community, say 10 miles away from Bonita Beach where I'm at could actually be a little bit different than what we're experiencing here in this area compared to even down the street in Naples. So it just depends on where you're at. And I get a lot of feedback on my channel as well, where people are like, there's still a bidding war, this and that. And I'm just looking at it. I'm like, just look at the hot markets, the more cyclical markets, and look at those trends of what's going on. I mean, look at Boise, Idaho. That's one of the hottest real estate markets in the country. And I hate when people say, or the media is like, it's a hot real estate market, almost implying you should go out there and buy real estate. And all that tells me is the prices are just getting out of control. And eventually, I mean, Allison, I think you hit it. You don't need to be super smart to look at a chart and see just parabolic increase of valuation of an asset and be like, that there's something wrong with that, and I think it's just a common sense kind of thing. And you have some people saying
something
that
odd, you know what I mean? It's like you can spot it and see that if what we've seen over time is like this, it's just kind of wavy, and then you see vertical lift off. It's like, okay, something's going on here. I don't know what's going to happen here, but like this does not, something doesn't match up. One of these things is not like the other. That's just the way I look at it. And I kind of want to just sit back and see where does it lead instead of diving in the mystery.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm looking at it like any other bubble. It's a big bubble in my opinion. And in my opinion, values will come down. Initially, before things started to shift, I was under the pretense of, it's going to come back to pre-pandemic pricing. But now I'm starting to think we might be closer to the 2008 crash. And the reason is, I think that the Fed the Fed and the government's in trouble because I don't think that they're going to have the amount of money to bail out because they have to combat inflation. The last recession, we didn't have this inflationary environment like we do right now. And I think it's going to cause devastation. So I think a lot of businesses are going to fail, which again, back to kind of the beginning of this talk, is going to cause a huge unemployment because there are no more options for the Fed. If we are in a healthy market, let me just put it this way, the Fed would not be increasing rates so aggressively like they are right now. We're not, the economy is not healthy. And there's a lot of macroeconomics that I think is going to push real estate into a crash environment.
Yeah, I had Peter Schiff on, and he was talking about this kind of the same thing that you're saying right now, which is what they could do in 2008, 2009, whether you agree or disagree with the action, what they could have done 12 years ago to try to, I think in a lot of cases, people say just buy time, but maybe even set us up for a worse crash. They can't do now because of inflation. And so there's not really a safety net this time. And then that's what makes this different. At least that's what I hear from a lot of people who are kind of, I think, share your ideas on a lot of it. So that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Peter Schiff, he was trying to get investors to buy into shorting the housing market prior to the last crash because he knew what was coming. Now, I mean, obviously your viewers probably watched that interview, and I couldn't agree more. And I think this time around, it's going to be way worse.
Okay, well, one place where the Fed has no control over prices is AllisonWinePromo.com. So you guys go over and check out AllisonWinePromo.com. There will be no crash there, at least that I'm aware of. You can get 50% off of my favorite Malbecs from Argentina and 50% off shipping. You get a free bottle of wine when you get your first order. There's 3 that come with it. One comes from a very small operation where they handpick the grapes. Another uses natural fermentation. The third comes from almost 9,000 feet. It's extreme altitude wine. These are great wines. My favorite wines, you can't get them at a grocery store. Why would you want to? So go support my work over at AllisonWinePromo.com. Also, if you're a coffee drinker, you can go to twinenginecoffee.com/Allison and get some organic coffee. It's USDA certified organic, high altitude. There's also a Katura tea. There's a light roast. There's a dark roast. There's a tumbler. There's a cool tote. There's pretty much anything you could ever want at twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. But I actually been drinking a lot of the Katura tea right now. I do a cold brew over 24 hours. It's the fruit around the coffee bean. It's very good. Tastes a lot like black tea. So go check out my sponsors and keep people like Steve coming on the channel. Okay, so Steve, one thing I wanted to ask you about with Dave Ramsey is, and I actually thought this was very interesting. Let me share my screen here real fast because I can't quite tell if it was just the heat that he's getting, because I've noticed, and when you're in the alternative media world, I'm sure you've seen this too. The audience tends to start just like in mainstream news. When I was in mainstream news, they kind of expect a certain kind of content from you, and I'm getting the sense reading the comments on Ramsey's channel that people are like, I don't think he's right about this. I think that there are a lot of people who watch him, and maybe it's because he's in the world of questioning the Fed or at least kind of looking at it from a standpoint of not getting into debt and not just thinking the American dream is all about having 6 homes and being in debt by $1 million and all this stuff. And so he has gained an audience of people who are sort of skeptical, I guess, of maybe the mainstream narrative or the establishment narrative. But then in this particular case, he's kind of part of the mainstream. It's not going to be that bad. We're probably at peak inflation. It's going to be okay. The housing market's not going to go down, all that kind of stuff. And I've seen his audience kind of go, come on, Dave, I think you're wrong on this one. And they're sort of pushing back against him. So I don't know if they did they did a hour-long stream, answering questions about, is the housing market going to crash? Obviously, this is on their radar enough to put this panel together. He did the intro. They had this whole panel together. I think it was done live. And it's on their radar. Whether they're starting to question, maybe we were wrong or right. They're getting enough heat, I think, from their audience that they're like, no, we need to really push back on this. So let me just play this quick clip and then I'll get your response. And let me know if you can't hear it.
Higher interest rates. We got high prices at the pump, high prices in the grocery store, and those things are all pinching most people's budgets. And most people already just barely had enough room in their budget to go buy that house that they wanted to do. And so they're feeling this, and that's where all this fear is coming from. I feel like I can't get that house, and I'm making a little more money, and I've got some things going, but not enough to offset everything. And it just feels tight. It feels kind of scary. I don't know if I've been boxed out of the market or not. And it gets all this emotion going. So here's the thing. Some of those people are not going to be buying houses right now. They're not going to be part of that demand. But those numbers that I just showed you represent a ton more demand than we have supply. That's why I am saying, it's a conclusion I came to, that we're not going to see crash of housing prices.
Okay, and I should say the numbers that he was showing, I'll go back to him real fast, were right here, and he's looking at investors and investor markets. So he's saying, hey, okay, yeah, so the average person is just scared, there are a lot of just average Joes out there that don't have enough savings. They're not going to buy right now. But look at all these places where investors, you're an investor. So what do you think about his statement there? It's just number one, this is an emotional reaction. People are just afraid and kind of baselessly. I think he's sort of making that argument that it's just everybody's, it's just a Chicken Little thing and everybody's freaking out and it's just emotion. We need to stay the course and just be rational about it. And then number two, one of the reasons we should be rational is because look at these top 10 cities on the left there where investors are still buying up a significant amount of the market. And if they were scared, they wouldn't be here. And we still have all this. So why is everybody freaking out? What do you think about that?
I mean, there's still investors buying and still institutional investors buying. Like there's certain institutional investors that is part of their complete business model. And then you have other investors that are buying that, frankly, I think that they don't necessarily know what they're doing, but they're making money in the short term and not really looking at what is to come. I mean, you can look at what Zillow did. I mean, Zillow had to unload, I forget how many thousands of houses because they made a mistake in their business model and what they were doing to buy. So I think it's like when you're using other people's money, whether that's venture capitalists or investor money or debt, you're in charge of that. Sometimes you're not really as protective over that dollar. And I think that we see companies out there and even small investors out there. I mean, I was talking to an investor or somebody that builds houses for a smaller investor, and this lady's using other people's money, and she put these investors together to buy these homes, and they're, in my opinion, grossly overpriced. I think that I'm always of the philosophy of buy cheap and sell when things are expensive. And I think that anybody could look at real estate right now and say things are expensive. So it goes back to kind of what Allison was saying in the beginning. You know, you look at things and you just kind of take more of a common sense approach on it. Now, I think that there are agendas for Dave Ramsey as well. I was calling them housing cheerleaders because it was literally 5-6 months ago when I was making videos calling out the CEOs of major corporations because they don't want to see a slowdown in real estate sales. Now, Dave Ramsey has what are called, I think it's ELPs. So he has basically a funnel, a filtration system of bringing leads to different professionals, whether it's a real estate agent, a mortgage broker, an insurance agent. So I don't know if it's just because of that where he has to kind of put this facade on to make sure that people are still going out and getting financing and buying homes, or, you know, and he's getting it from higher ups, but I think he is the higher up in his company. I don't know, but I think I don't know. I think it's kind of irresponsible to kind of keep playing this card. And I think it's going to bite them in the rear when it happens.
I really got a lot out of this video. I should tell people when they go subscribe to your channel, which everybody should go do. Steve Daria, you see his name, SteveDaria over on YouTube. This one, Shocking Trends in the Housing Market, Get Prepared, and you had Travis Spencer on. What's his YouTube name again? He has another channel himself, right?
Yeah, The Real Estate Mindset.
Okay. And so I thought this was a really interesting conversation because he also talked about, like, he got burned big time in the last crash and learned a lot of lessons. And I think people should go watch this video because I got a lot out of it. But one thing you guys talked about, which I wasn't quite sure I understood as it pertains to what's happening right now, is a default bubble. Can you explain what a default bubble is and what that means for right now?
There is so much debt in the system right now that if you look at one really good indicator, which is a good indicator to see what is going to happen with the rest of the economy, one of the first things that goes are auto loans. So a lot of people went out and took out loans for car debt. Some people are actually even taking out HELOC loans on the equity that they have in their home to buy vehicles, to buy pools for their homes, to buy, to renovate their homes and everything else. And anyway, the defaults on car debt is skyrocketing. You have the amount of credit card debt skyrocketing, and people's savings are beginning to dwindle as well. But we're in a debt bubble. Even our government. I mean, if the Fed raises rates too high too quickly, our government won't even be able to service the debt that our government has. So it's a scary slope right now.
And what if it doesn't raise rates? Because that's something that Peter Schiff, for instance, talks about. He's not popular in his statement that, a lot of people I think push back on him, like, well, you either have to do that or you have to raise taxes on the middle class. Like that's what he's basically, you got to pay for government somehow. And he's like, if they don't raise it, it's going to be worse. If they do raise it, it's going to suck. It just seems like stuck between a rock and a hard place at this point.
I mean, they need to push us into a recession. I think when the reports, well, they're actually trying to change. I don't know if you saw this. They're trying to change the definition of a recession now. I don't know if you caught wind of that.
No, I have to look at
that. Check it out. Now it's no longer 2 negative GDPs in a row. It's asinine what's going on right now. It's pure manipulation. Even look at the CPI. The CPI, they're talking 9.1%. I mean, have your bills stayed around or increased 9.1%? It's even when they figure out the housing CPI, it's so inaccurate. And I don't know if you know this, when they come up with the housing portion of the CPI, they ask owners like Allison, how much do you think, if you rented your house, how much do you think you could rent it for? And most homeowners have no clue. They just throw numbers out there. And that's how they come up with the CPI for the rent index instead of actually taking real data. So I mean, if the Fed doesn't continue to raise rates, we're going to see inflation just continue to skyrocket, and people are just not going to be able to afford anything, including their mortgage.
I'm glad you brought this up because it's just another example, depending on what media you're consuming. So Fox has, what recession? Biden, Yellen, and Democrats want to change the definition, but they can't change the facts. A recession has always been defined as 2 straight quarters of negative growth, but Biden and Yellen aren't buying it. And then if you go to Business Insider, no, the White House isn't changing the definition of a recession. So it's just totally different. But I don't want to waste your time on that one. That's interesting, though. I'm not surprised. We're changing definitions of all kinds of things nowadays. Yep. Okay. Let me really fast ask you a quick question about the short term versus the long game. So this person, for instance, says investors aren't buying for the short term. This is the highest the market has bid. They aren't stupid, thinking that it's going to, maybe it'll crunch in the next year or two, but if you hang on to it for 10 or 15 years, you'll be sitting pretty. What do you think about that? I mean, you're saying one of the videos I shared with my locals community, which I'm going to take questions from in a second, was about how you're not buying in 2022. But what if you're somebody who's, I need to move. I hate where I live. They've got all these mandates, whatever. And you're willing to hang on to your house for a decade. Are you in the same position, or is it just the people you're concerned about who are buying as like an investment to sell a year or 2, 3 down the road? I also know that too, there might be the people you'd say, if you're going to be underwater in your mortgage, like if that's going to be a problem for you and you might have to sell because you lose your job. I mean, that would be the thing I would be the most concerned about, would be you get into it and you're like, yeah, I want to hold on to it for 10 years. But then all of a sudden, you lose your job and you're like, I can't afford this anymore. I got to go. But now you're also underwater. I used to cover stories like that in Seattle when I moved, even in 2013. I was still interviewing people who are in that situation. So I'm just curious. Yeah, let's talk long game versus short game.
Yeah, I mean, if you're buying it because you have to move and you're buying it for your family and you're going to be there for a long time, you're comfortable with the mortgage payment, you're comfortable with your employment, or maybe you're self-employed, that's not a problem, then it may make sense. And right now you have, in a lot of markets, you have a leg up in making offers. And I know I said I'm not buying in 2022, but we are making offers, but they're very low offers. I don't think that many are going to come to fruition right now. But we made an offer on another house, and it was like $350,000 below what they were asking, and we were close to getting it, actually. So I think if you guys are buying and that's entrenched in your mind that you want to buy and you're going to be there for a long time, then don't get emotional on any one property. Make offers and continue to wait the market out, even if you have to get into a short-term rental, and just play it slowly. Now, as an investor, what makes me nervous, and I think I'm probably one of the only people on YouTube probably saying this, but I predict rent rates will come down. Okay. And I think that when that happens, investors that bought at the peak that are relying on, say, $2,500 a month for that rent, when properties do come down, an investor like myself buys like a comparable property, and I bought, say, maybe 60% of the price that investor paid, and he's got debt and everything else. And I come in and I'm like, well, I don't need $2,500 a month. I can rent this thing out at, $2,300 or $22,000 or $2,000 a month. And I'm undercutting the market. Other investors are going to do the same that bought right. They're going to undercut the market. And then that's going to force investors. It's going to expose investors that are over leveraged. And those investors are going to get stuck because now they were in a cash flow position relying on really, really high rents. And when those rents come down, then those investors are going to be stuck. They're going to be underwater as well because they want to liquidate and sell the properties. And they're going to realize that, they didn't put enough money down and they might be upside down. And I think it's just going to be another facet of causing destruction in real estate.
Okay. I want to take some questions from locals. Are you on locals, Steve?
I'm not.
You should consider it. I think you could do really well. I mean, I don't get money for pimping out locals or anything, but whenever I spot someone, I'm like, you could take questions from people, and it's not, it was developed as an alternative to YouTube because you can upload videos there, unlike Patreon, where Patreon you have to just put the link. I don't think you can actually, at least I can't upload videos to Patreon, but it's a place where people can support your work and go direct with you. And then it's like a lot of us set it at $5 for subscription. You can comment and ask questions. I take people's questions ahead of time for interviews, and then I do an editorial board meeting. But yeah, consider it. Anyway, and that way, people, if you do, let me know, because then I'll tell people how they can connect with you. But otherwise, right now, they should just follow your YouTube channel, right?
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So, okay. One of the first questions, actually, well, I'll take this one and then I'll ask you the other one. We are looking to acquire vacant land in the next 6 months and then build $2 million. Is there any way to time when to negotiate with a builder for the best price? Would you plan to build in 2023 or wait?
I think it's an excellent question. Right now, materials are still difficult to get, and the cost of materials are still relatively high. They are coming down. Labor is still really high right now as well. So I would keep an eye on both of those. If you're buying land, like if you're investing in like a community where they're, it's a CDD where they're basically building out an entire infrastructure and a community, clubhouse, all that. A lot of those, even our local market, they're coming out with a lot of incentives. They're actually reducing prices in some cases. So you can absolutely go in and negotiate with like the on-site sales guy. Don't be afraid to ask. Now, if you're just buying some land and it's not in a community or whatever the case is, and there's no rush, because I have plans of doing the same. I want to build basically houses to rent out in certain areas. And the cost of land is still outrageous. So I'm going to wait that out. And by the time the cost of land comes down and we acquire the land, then I think will be a prime time to build, which I think a lot's going to happen over the next 12 to 18 months. We'll look back on this video and be like, damn. And again, it's just my opinion, whatever the case is. But I think that there's going to be so much turmoil that we're going to see. Let me put it this way real quick. The state of Florida, and Allison lived in Florida for a while and everything else. We're more cyclical and everything else. The last crash, a lot of Florida was a hot real estate market for speculation, everything else. And I knew a lot of contractors, general contractors, as well as just contractors for trades. And what happened was a large industry in Florida, and it still is construction. And when the market just tanked, construction stopped. So if you wanted to tile your house or build an addition, you were able to get very, very cheap labor and cheaper materials and everything else, because it goes back to supply and demand. So I think that everything will get cheaper once demand slows, which we're already seeing it slow. I mean, 6 months from now, it might even be an opportunity. I don't know. So I think time will tell, but I think I would just keep an eye on pricing, you know?
So you're thinking though, within the next year and a half though?
Based on how quickly things have turned around in the last month, it could be as quick as 6 months, but it also takes time for things to bottom out, and you can really never figure out a bottom. I've thought I figured out the top of the market, which is why we sold even our condo here. And even in 2018, before the pandemic, is when we were selling our other real estate, because real estate was just limping along before everything happened, influx of money and cheap money. But I mean, it could be, 6, 12, 18 months or 24 months before we see. I mean, it took, I think, 4 years in the last crash to completely bottom out, but I think we're on a trajectory of things happening way faster.
Okay, since you're bringing up Florida, where you live and where I'm from, and then other states like Texas or hot states where people are migrating from, like California, or our state currently of Washington, where people are just sick and tired of some of the COVID policies, I think have pushed a lot of people out of these states.
Yeah.
Depending on who you're listening to, you'll hear people say, no, I mean, there's just so much demand, it's going to be fine, these are safer. Or you'll hear people like, I follow Reventure Consulting too, who gets a lot of flack for being like an alarmist, I should say, because I've seen a lot of videos about that. And I don't know if you get that too, but he's saying it's going to be worse in those areas where everybody's been buying up, like Austin, for instance, I think is one of his top markets where he thinks housing prices are going to crash because it's just like this migration of people has created this bubble. And I mean, that's one of the places we're looking is like the Hill Country, about, an hour west of Austin, San Antonio. And that's one of the places where I have seen that vertical lift off for the prices. And I mean, it's insane. Like, to see houses that just a couple years ago were $250K that are now $500,000 or more than $500,000. I'm looking at it, I'm like, that just scares me. It would scare me to buy that place right now. But like I said, there are other people who are like, no, these are the safer markets because this is where people want to live and people are going to keep moving there and it would be a great investment and that kind of thing. So I'm just curious what you think this person is asking about Florida, Texas, Tennessee. Do you think there will be as much of a crash as other states?
Yeah, I mean, we can look at Boise, Idaho, and look at the amount of people that left California for that area, and look what the market's doing right now. I mean, they're crashing. That market is crashing. And people said this in the last crash, before the last crash in Florida, there's like 1,000 people a day moving in the state of Florida. And people were like, it's never going to happen. Florida is paradise, this and that. But I can tell you, we saw a lot of people move out of the state of Florida. Back on contractors and the industry in Florida in terms of construction, a lot of people moved out of Florida because they didn't have any more work. So nobody was building houses. I mean, everything, all the trades, a lot of people moved out of the state and they were chasing work in other states due to natural devastation, everything else. But then, like even, and Allison, I'm sure you've heard of halfbacks, right? People that moved to Florida from like the Midwest or Northeast, they moved to Florida, too damn hot for them. And then they move halfway back and they'll go into the Carolinas or Tennessee or whatever. So you have to understand, like, some people move to a state and they're like, I hate it. I don't want to be here. I want to be back with my family. And we're seeing that in even New York City. I mean, people are moving back into the city after people were saying, I'm out of here. I'm moving out of any kind of metro area. And people forget what happened and everything else. And they slowly start to migrate back. So, and there's a lot of second homes that people are buying. And when the economy takes a dump, the first thing that's going to go are second homes and vacation homes. And those areas that were just mentioned, I think a lot of them probably were second homes as well. But I think a lot of people also they're done. They did their migration. They moved out of those states over the last couple of years based on politics and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I would tend to agree that there's probably, or at least fewer of us, like my husband and I, who are still waiting to make that move. I think that more people already took the leap over the last couple of years. Okay, are you familiar with BlackRock's Aladdin system?
I'm not, no.
Okay, I will skip to the next one. China has had financial issues and home prices continue to rise until people are now refusing to pay mortgages. They are seeing prices fall now. Will it be a bigger price crash in the US? I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Chinese market, but
I mean, one of their largest developer is just getting destroyed right now. So I think that they're in a way worse situation, I think, than the United States. But I don't know. I don't follow necessarily the China market. But I also, in relationship to kind of across the globe, a lot of countries adopted the same system of the United States with their central banks and keeping everything artificially low and stimulating the markets and everything else. And everybody's trying to play catch up because there's such high inflation. I mean, look at Canada and other countries. So it's not just us, but I think we're going to see it across the globe.
okay. We literally, and I mean it in its truest sense, just started recovering from the last one. Finally sold the house we were stuck in with after 10 years of misery. I do not want to go through that again. We recently bought property with no house. Would it be better to wait to buy a tiny home, or will building and unconventional homes not be as affected?
Yeah, I mean, a tiny home, you can, if it's for your property that you're going to live in or whatever, I mean, you shop it. People are, depending on where you're at, I think a lot of contractors are starting to slow down. The stats came out in terms of remodeling. The remodeling industry is on a decline right now as well. But I mean, I think that, if things will come down even further in price of labor and materials probably over the next 6 to 12 months. So I'm of the waiting game. I mean, if I can come across a really good deal on something, then I'll wait, but or I'll buy. But I mean, right now it's a matter of being patient.
Okay, I think this is the last one. This is kind of I think a counter to what you were saying. So let me know if this doesn't make sense, because like I said, I don't know anything about real estate, but the last housing crisis was the perfect storm. I think we've talked about this before. A lot of people are like, it's just not the same as 2008. It's not the same. It's not going to be as bad.
Yep.
Very loose credit guidelines, no skin in the game, 0% down, no stated income programs, subprime, price close to A paper, which I have no idea what that means, and irresponsible pooling of risky loans with other loans. Also, there were negative amortization loans combined with zero down payments that made it easy for borrowers to walk away from their mortgage. That being said, the current market run-up credit quality is 100% better as well. Income is underwritten more conservative, and borrowers have skin in the game with very few no down loans. Yes, the market will level off and see some declines in values, but nothing like 2008. It is healthy to see this happen as the market run up from cheap money and demand out of balance with lack of supply. The market will be more balanced with a higher rate slowing down demand, but in my opinion, this is not close to 2008. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, it goes back to kind of what we were talking about before. I agree 1,000% in terms of how 2008 got there. I mean, there's no denying that. But to say that people have more skin in the game, I don't know about that. I know, even within our office, there's a lot of people that were buying properties with, again, 3.5% and 5% down. So it doesn't take much for people to be upside down in an upside down situation, even if the market flatlines. And if somebody has to sell their property, they're going to have to cut a check at closing. And I think that's the biggest thing. But if you look at kind of what Allison was saying too, you look at property values, and during that period of time, I mean, look at look at the Fed chart or Fred chart on that. I mean, the property values are they're astronomically high, and wage growth is not going to keep up with that. And it was a matter of time before interest rates rose, and things start to deplete and people that can't afford houses. Again, I think we're going to come into a different market based on unemployment. I think there's going to be a lot of companies go under once the Fed keeps raising rates. No more cheap money out there. So
this person followed up with, I guess the question is whether the lending standard is really higher than last time. If so, to what extent? Are there many loans with teasing rates over the first few years right now, which may get crushed soon if Fed continues raising the rates? Will inflation keep price rising in nominal terms while real value declines?
We are seeing adjustable rate mortgages and lenders pushing those right now, which I think is ridiculous. You're seeing non-QM lenders go out of business right now. So those are lenders that cannot sell to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. And there's no other investors that are necessarily buying those loans. So they're more risky. They're the stated income loans. They're the bank statement loans. But we're still seeing those entities out there, other entities out there that are providing looser lending. So that's kind of what happened in the last crash too, is as things started to fall apart, there was more loosening, and then even negative amortization loans. It got real messy there. But like this time around, yeah, people have a little bit more money in their pockets to buy properties, especially with all the stimulus and everything else, and their credit ratings were better. But one bad decision on a property that you have to sell because you have a job loss can affect your credit like that, despite what your past 10, 20 years of credit history was. So not everybody, I mean, I think it's just it's a different market for sure. And the devastation, I think, is going to be comparable.
Okay, final question or two to just wrap is, why did you decide to start your YouTube channel and talk about this? Again, everybody, Steve Daria, go to his YouTube channel, check him out, does all the real estate stuff that we talked about today. Why did you start this, and why talk about this?
I appreciate that question too. I mean, during that time when the market crashed, I did end up short selling my condo, and I was overextended. And by the way, I had like 800 credit score back then too. So anyway, overextended and ended up short selling the condo, lived in my office for a period of time, and then reset and paid cash for a property because values came down so low. And then just realized that I was much happier as a person because of my cost of overhead was so low. And then I just had so much more money every single month that I was able to invest more into other assets. So I really just want people to be cautious when they're especially taking on huge amounts of debt, despite what it is. And I think that, if you could structure a way to be free and clear on your mortgage, then you really set up a foundation for you and your family, and really big growth happens thereafter. And some people will discount what I'm saying. That some people are like, it's dumb to pay off your mortgage, especially if you have a really low rate, because you can make more money elsewhere. But I look at it more of a mindset situation, that if I don't have to pay a mortgage and I don't have car debt, credit card debt, none of that, then I can do so many other things. I don't have to, I'm self-employed, but I don't have to listen to a shitty boss. I can quit any point in time. I can start a small business, a side hustle, and not have to worry about making the money to pay a $5,000 mortgage or whatever it is. So, that's my whole intent with the YouTube channel. It's just to, help people make better decisions. And, I think over the last 2 years, we've seen people, yes, they've got really good interest rates on their mortgages, but to me, it can be irrelevant because of the debt size that people have, because that debt has to be repaid in some fashion, whether you pay over a 30-year period or you sell it. or refinance it into another debt, like that debt has to be paid. And I think people have taken on a severe amount of debt in the last 2 years. And I'm here to say, like, be careful.
We live in Delray Beach, Florida, purchased home in 2012 for $200K, and now it's appraised at $640K. That's nuts, man.
Sell it.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, going back to what you were saying, I think you and Dave Ramsey, we started talking about Dave Ramsey and how you have this video that's doing really well, just questioning his saying that, no, there's not going to be a crash. In a lot of ways, you guys are aligned on the freedom that comes from dealing with your debt and being financially responsible, and not necessarily buying into the rat race of, like, the more you're entangled in, like, the better you're living the dream, I guess, in America, that you can be happy with less. You can be happy with a reasonably sized house and some property somewhere that, may not be, maybe you're not upwards in, $650,000 or $1 million in value, but you're happy. I mean, what's the value for contentment, I guess, and just what's enough, and just getting people to ask those questions. And so I think, like, one thing Dave talks about a lot is that 50 or 60, 70 years ago, I wasn't alive, but I'm going to take his word for it. The average family was okay with a certain square footage and a couple of bedrooms, and that was looked at as success. And now we often, like, success is you have 2-car garage and you've got 5 bedrooms and you have a pool and all these things. And so, like, just questioning, like, where is my real desire coming from? Is it really because I need this, or is it because I've been told that my value comes from more is better or whatever? And so I think you guys have a lot in common. What would you say would be your biggest difference when it comes to this issue, particularly of, like, the real estate market and what's going to happen in the next couple of years? How do you come to such different conclusions? Like, what would be the, top 1 or 2 things that you guys differ on related to this that causes you to see what's going to happen so differently?
I mean, and if you look at 70 years ago, there wasn't a 30-year mortgage. It was amortized over like 7 years. So I just look at it like people are taking on ungodly amounts of debt to live in a property right now, where I'm just under the opinion of, I think that the values will come down. And if you have the ability to wait it out, I look at it like I would rather pay a higher interest rate, even 10% interest on a property that I paid $200,000 for, instead of a property that I paid $500,000 for at a really, really low rate, because I know I got to pay that debt back, and I could probably refinance it in the future, because eventually rates will come down. They might hit 10% or whatever the case is. And I do agree. Like, I've watched Dave Ramsey for years and years and years. I agree with a lot of stuff that he says. And I think that we do have a lot of the same opinions and thought processes. But on this, I can't get on the same boat.
Steve, anything else you'd like to add or tell people before we go? I really appreciate your taking the time.
No, you're good. I like to spend the hour with you for sure. I think that you're really good at asking the right questions and enlightening people on your channel. And I think just be smart when you guys are taking debt, and try to get don't take debt for, maybe I'll leave it with this. Any debt that you take that's not putting money in your pocket is bad debt. And even your house is a liability, because it's taking money out of your pocket. And if you're a first-time home buyer, I would suggest trying to find a house with a guest house, or a house or maybe a multifamily, like a duplex or triplex, where you can live in the house and then have a portion or all of it paid by a tenant. And then you really start to achieve that financial freedom aspect of things. But live light and stress-free, and you're going to have a better life if you don't have a ton of debt.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Like, or even could you Airbnb or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've thought about that too. So when it comes to the rent versus buy conversation, because I guess that, kind of goes to the point you were just making, we're often taught that, like, you get to a certain age and like you've got to buy because otherwise you're just wasting your money, and rent is just throwing money out the window.
Yeah.
Can I ask you that real fast too before you go? Like, where do you fall on the line of, when you think it's a good point for someone to just hold steady renting a place, versus, okay, no, I gotta buy because every month that I stay in my rent, I'm just paying somebody else's mortgage instead of my own.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of renting at all. And actually, the first time in, I don't know how, like probably 2 decades, I'm renting for the first time. Well, we're leasing back this condo until literally Sunday, the end of this month. And then we're moving into a short-term rental for 6 months over in Naples. And trust me, I do not like renting at all. And I think that if you're strategic about buying and selling real estate, you can be very wealthy. And a lot of wealth has been brought about by real estate. Even your primary residence, by the way, if you buy right on your primary residence and you sell it in 2 years, and I'm not an accountant in any sense, but a lot of people don't understand that the gain that you get on that is tax-free per individual up to $250,000, and for married couple up to $500,000. So you pay 0 taxes on that gain. Talk to an accountant or whatever the case is. So I am a big believer, like you probably should buy real estate. You should buy a house because there's tax advantages, everything else. But I think you need to buy right. And yes, rent rates are really high. I think that they will come down. You don't want to be a renter for years and years and years and years. But you also don't want to be subject to having to repay a mortgage of $500,000 and you lose your job and then you are underwater and you have a foreclosure or short sale. That's going to set you back way many more years of being able to rebuy in the future. So if you can be a little bit more patient, then it might behoove you to be more patient as a renter.
Yeah, like my final thought is I think there's value we don't have to talk about in just being able to sleep at night and not be worried about what's going to happen tomorrow if things just combust, you lose your job. I actually lost my job last year over my YouTube channel. I work for the state. They didn't like that. I don't know if you knew this, but yeah, I got fired over my YouTube channel because I was interviewing people who were censored over vaccine mandates, and they had a vaccine mandate, and they were like, you can't talk to these people anymore because it's undermining our mandate. And I was like, I'm not gonna stop doing that. And by the way, I have a First Amendment right to continue. And they were like, peace. So I lost my job, and it was actually a really good learning experience in that it's easy to think like everything's just going to stay the way it is. You're just like, okay, I can afford this because I make this much income, and often not thinking about like, yeah, but what if tomorrow you did lose your job? And in our case, health insurance, so now you got to figure out health insurance and all this other, there is a value to not being tied to these things that you have right now, because they have to keep going the way they are every day. Otherwise you're screwed. And I'm glad we were living in a way where we could take that hit, because we had already built in, to the system that we had a little bit extra. Do we want to stay like that forever? No. Eventually we'd like to get back to where we were before, where you're like adding some more to your savings than you are now, and planning for retirement and all that kind of thing. But it wasn't a lethal hit to our financial system, and I just think one of the values of what you're talking about, and like the same with Dave, is to just say it's easy to just go along to get along and not think about this stuff. And definitely like the banks, I feel like marketing, PR firms, whatever, like they're out there to tell you like, it's going to be fine. You're going to be okay. Consumer confidence is very important. And often we're just not told like, yeah, but there's a lot of value in just being able to sleep at night and not be stressed out, and there's value in like having a garden where you can feed yourself and stuff like that, instead of having to, just things that we overlook that we think don't have a value because they don't come with a shiny new paint job, or a pool or all this stuff. Like, yeah, that's got a financial value, I guess, but where's the value in contentment and just peace, just general like peace of mind? And I think, you know, that's the journey our family's been on, and I've really appreciated it because it gives you a little bit of self-awareness too, maybe a lot of self-awareness. Like, why did I think I needed all this stuff anyway? I mean, where does that come from, and who am I trying to impress? And like, why do I keep so busy? Why can't I just be quiet and just live a simple life? Like, what is it about me and my personality that freaks out about that? All those big questions. So thanks, Steve, for taking the time. Everybody go to Steve's channel, subscribe, keep in touch, and see what he's up to. And I'll have you back. We'll see, maybe 6 months from now, see what happens. And hey, if I can get Dave to come on, I'll totally have a duel. We'll see.
That sounds good. I appreciate you having me on, Allison.